guys, my name is Alisha and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be sharing with you my favorite romance books as well as some books that just have romance in them. So let's get into it. So I like to preface this by saying that I'm pretty hard to please when it comes to romance books. I feel like I've read a fair few. I'm not like a romance reader by any means, but I have read a lot, and I always find that a lot of the really popular romance books that people like, I don't really vibe with as much. And there are some that like I definitely really love as well, but just some of the really popular ones that I feel like are staples of the romance genre, I don't always love. And so whenever I read a romance book, there's like certain things that I need to make sure the book checks before I can say that I absolutely love this book. So this list is basically going to be my personal favorites, and I know I was thinking maybe I could throw in some really popular ones, but I feel like, you've heard the popular ones, and what's the point of me talking about them when I don't even really like them? So I'm just going to tell you the ones that I really love, and maybe some titles you might not have heard of as often. And yeah, let's get into it. So to start off, I am going to talk about a few books that are really popular, but these are books that I think just are great and really worth reading. So first up, we have two books, really. This is The Kiss Quotient and The Bride Test by Helen Huang. I feel like a lot of people have read these books. They are really popular, but I think they are deservedly so because they just hit so many points in the romance genre that are just make them so great and so much fun to read. Both of these books have really great representation. We have Asian characters, we also have autistic representation, and I just overall love that. The biggest thing that I love about these books is the way that Helen Huang writes these books. She just has such a funny and kind of witty writing style that makes it really fun to read, and also makes it so that both characters in these books are just really strong and really like well done, independent of each other, and then when you put them in the romance, they just make each other better, if that makes sense. Just so much chemistry between the characters. You feel it from the get-go and you're always rooting for the characters, so I love that. Some of the tropes in both of these books, so we have in The Kiss Quotient we have fake dating, and I believe this is a bit of a Pretty Woman with a twist type of story, so also really fun. And then in The Bride Test, I would say it has a bit of a Grumpy Sunshine vibe, and especially Grumpy Sunshine is definitely one of my favorite tropes, but what I love is either when the girl is the grumpy one, which doesn't happen as often, or if the guy is the grumpy one in the situation, then he isn't grumpy in the sense that where he's mean. And usually where romance books don't do well for me personally is when the guy is the grumpy one, but he acts very standoffish and mean and like a schoolyard bully when kids are like 7, 10 and don't know how to express their emotions, so they just go around being mean to their crush. We don't like that. What in this book, what we have is basically a Grumpy Sunshine vibe, but the guy who is the grumpy one, he is just very much in denial and maybe like not in touch with his feelings, so it gets him a while to kind of get out of his shell. But I love the couple in The Bride Test, and again, Helen Huang's writing is amazing, so I don't know what you're doing if you haven't checked out these books because they're just so popular, but if you haven't, you definitely should. Then I have Take a Hint, Annie Brown by Talia Hibberd. This is another really popular romance author and series. There's also Get a Life, Chloe Brown, which is the first book, and Act Your Age, Eve Brown, which is the third book. But I'm specifically recommending the second book. I have read the first book and it was okay. I didn't love it as much, but the second book I think was just some of the best romance writing that I've ever read. Again, kind of similar with Helen Huang, Talia Hibberd does a really good job of writing really funny and charismatic characters, and you can like see that through her writing. And I always say that like her personality kind of shines through in her writing, because just like our main character, Danny Brown, is just this really relatable, funny, kind of a pessimistic character, and at least for me, that's pretty relatable. She's very like sarcastic, all of those things. And then you have your hero, who is kind of a Grumpy Sunshine vibe in this too, but our hero is very just like a really sweet guy, really respectful, and really cares about the main girl. And so again, you can really tell their chemistry and how much they care for each other, and the build up and the character development to get to a good, positive part of their relationship is just really well done. So again, I would say the tropes for this is definitely Grumpy Sunshine, whereas this one has our girl being the grumpy one, guys the sunshine one. And I would also say we have some pining, so our hero is definitely pining for the main character, which I also love to see. And next I have Always Only You by, I believe, Chloe Lies is her name. I'm not sure who the author is, but you'll see it in the picture here. This book I think is also really well done. It also has some autistic representation as well as some chronic illness representation, and if you are dealing with either of those things, I think this book does a really good job of representing those things and talking about them in a really good way. Same with Helen Huang in her books. I think the representation is also done really well. In this book we have our tropes. There's actually quite a few of them, but we have our hero pining for the main character. Again, I love that. I love seeing the hero being the one going after the girl, but in, you know, a nice, respectful way. And we also have a bit of a forbidden romance. I mean, it's not like taboo or anything, but it's a bit of like a workplace romance, so the two main characters don't think they can necessarily be together and they don't want their like employers to know and things like that. So that's why I'm calling it a bit of a forbidden romance, but it's not like, you know, taboo or anything like that. This book just has really great chemistry with their characters, and I also think it's another book where both characters stand really well on their own, so that when you put them into the romance, like they're really just bringing the best out of each other. And yeah, I love to see that, so I really like this book. And next I have another pretty popular romance, and that is The Love Hypothesis by Hazelwood. So this has been getting a lot of hype recently with booktube, book talk, everything. So I mean, again, if you haven't read this, definitely get on to that because this book is great. This book is what I would say is kind of like poking fun at the romance genre. If you read this book, you kind of know what I mean, but this author, I believe, is a fan fiction writer, and this is her first published work, and you can definitely tell a difference in that. Not to say that like the writing is inferior in any way, but just that I feel like fan fiction writers are really good at, you know, building in these tropes and these specific types of characters in situations where you just know, you know, what type of story this is going to be and how these characters are going to react and all of those things. And honestly, you know, what makes tropes so great is the fact that, you know, you can read them as many times as possible and still come away with something, still have fun with it. And I think this book really does that. So the specific tropes, this book definitely has fake dating, and then it also has Grumpy Sunshine vibes. And I think, again, like this book just does a really great job at poking fun at itself, because it's very clearly moments where our characters are in situations where you've read about them so many times and you know exactly what's going to happen, but instead of just kind of letting that happen, the author is kind of like, haha, like look at the situation we're in. That might not make sense, but I just think it was a really fun part of the book, and overall, like the plot of this book and the characters and everything, the chemistry was just really fun. I do see a lot of, with more and more people reading this book, there are some people who have brought up valid points of things that aren't necessarily great in this book, such as our main character's best friend is a little pushy with her friend, and because it's like a fake dating situation, it can be a little uncomfortable. But I think, I mean, the author and the story itself had good intentions, so I didn't necessarily have a problem with it, but I can understand, you know, if other people do. But I do still think that this was a really fun book. Then I have The Trouble with Hating You by Saginay Patel. This is a less commonly, I guess, heard about or known book, and it's definitely one of my favorite romance books. I think it just does so many things so well, and number one being having a strong main character, our main girl, and, you know, letting her have a mind of her own, and then getting into a romance with, you know, knowing who she is and knowing what she wants. So I think it does a great job of that. Our main guy is also one of the sweetest, most respectful, most kindest kind of heroes I've ever read, and absolutely in love with him. And this book also has such great South Asian representation. I think a big thing with the romance genre is that we don't have enough like people of color in these books. A lot of romance books do have white main characters, and I mean, nothing wrong with that, but I do love to see when these books in this specific genre kind of branches out, and more books with, you know, brown characters, Asian characters, black characters, like all of the different people are represented, because obviously everybody can fall in love, and, you know, we shouldn't have only white characters in the genre. Anyways, a bit of a rant there, but this book I do think is so great. And for the tropes in this book, we definitely have Grumpy Sunshine vibes, again with the girl being the grumpy one, so like I said, love to see that. And then we also have a bit of like the guy pining and like chasing after the girl, and yeah, I love to see that as well. So this is a great book and you should definitely check it out. Then next I have 7 Days in June by T.O. Williams. This is a bit of a newer book and I have been hearing some hype for this book, and it's definitely deserving of it. I think this book is pretty under the radar until recently, but if you haven't read it, you definitely should. This might be one of my favorite romances ever, and for like different reasons. It's not necessarily just because of the romance. I just think that the way T.O. Williams wrote this book just shows like how real people can be and how different circumstances and different positions can change an individual and can affect their life. And yeah, I just think the way she wrote these characters just feels really real and really relatable, even if like you don't, or if you haven't ever dealt with any of the situations the main characters deal with. Not saying that I have, but I mean, you just really relate to them as people. But basically this book has amazing writing, and like I said, I think that's the thing that makes this book just above the rest for me. But it also has really like complex and nuanced Black main characters, which again, I love to see representation, and I think this book does a wonderful job of it. This book is also dealing with kind of really heavy topics. Definitely go like look at the trigger warnings before reading this, but I would say it definitely deals with like depression, self-harm, drug use, addiction, things like that. So it can get a little heavy at times, and there were some scenes that were a little graphic, not in like a, I don't know, like violent or gruesome way, but just like the way that the book details the situation and the feelings the characters are going through are definitely very like in-depth, which for me I definitely really enjoyed, because like again, I think it made the characters really stand out. But yeah, like check in with those trigger warnings and everything before you read the book. In terms of tropes, this book definitely is a second chance romance. I personally don't read a lot of second chance romances. I think just there's something to say that if a relationship didn't work out the first time, I don't necessarily care to read about it like working out the second time, because sometimes there's just issues that maybe you can't get over. But I think that this book did a really great job, and we're also dealing with a relationship that these characters knew each other in high school, and then it's been like a long time. I think it's been like 15 years before they meet again, so they're at really different points of their lives now. So again, you can really see the growth and development as characters and as people before they get into this relationship again. So yeah, overall, absolutely love this book. Next, I have Love from A to Z by S.K. Ali. This is the only like YA book I have on this list, so it's not necessarily like a romance book. It doesn't have all of those tropes and things like that, but I think that this book does a really, really good job of having really great characters and having a really good romance in this like YA contemporary genre, which makes it so such a nice and kind of fun read. This book does have Muslim representation, and it has what I think as a Muslim myself is really good Muslim representation, especially as like a romance book or like a book that has romance in it. This book doesn't like pretend that these characters are not Muslim just to have certain things be shown, if you know what I'm saying. So I really appreciated that. And obviously this author is a Muslim herself, so she is writing from her own experiences and her own knowledge, and I mean, you can definitely see that in the book. This book just has really great characters and a really, really cute romance that like you're rooting for from the start, so I really loved it. So now I'm going to get into a few more books that aren't necessarily romance books, but they have romance in these books and romances that I really enjoyed. So first up, I have The Atlas 6 by Olivie Blake. This is a very hyped up book recently. It's been a lot on Book Talk and BookTube, and I read it near the end of last year, and I just had such a great time with this book. It's definitely a dark academia type of book. It has those vibes, and I would say the vibes are immaculate in this book. I think it does a really great job of having the kind of mysterious and dark atmosphere, but also having really complex, interesting characters with a really interesting plot to kind of carry you through the story. This book was not traditionally published, but it's getting published again by, I believe, Tor Books this year. And it has a really great brand new cover, although I feel like I'm in the minority who likes this first cover. Let me know if you also like this cover, because I do like the new cover, but I just think this one is really great on its own. So I don't know, that's just me. But anyways, in terms of the romance, this book has, I believe, like 6 main characters. And what I personally loved about this book is that there are so many characters you can kind of ship together, and there isn't necessarily a specific like couplings of these characters. Like they're kind of all over the place, and this is going to be a series, so I guess we'll see as we go on who the actual couples end up being. But in terms of this first book, I just feel like it's a really fun time seeing all the different character interactions and relationships, and you know, the relationships you see forming or maybe that you want to be but aren't necessarily here in this book. So I'm not going to give anything away, but there's definitely 3 characters that I feel like have a bit of like a love triangle, or if there is a love triangle, I would love to see something like that, because I feel like it could be done really well in this book. So yeah, I just think the book itself is so great, but then the romances really add a lot to this book, so I really loved it. And next up, I have The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. So this is another really popular book, and I definitely think that this book has a bit of a misinformation situation going on, because obviously it's called The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and it is dealing with the husbands that our main character Evelyn Hugo has throughout her life. But this book is definitely has a sapphic relationship, and we see as you go through the book that none of these husbands were actually Evelyn Hugo's like end game. She has a specific relationship with a woman named Celia St. James, and that is the woman that was the love of her life. And as you go through the book, you see that, and I just think that that relationship was so powerful and so like just written so beautifully. And it definitely wasn't perfect, and there's a lot of problems with this relationship. Some people may even call it toxic, but I think just the way that it's written, you really see the amount of love and amount of like passion and kind of the trials and tribulations that both these characters had to go through to be together and to love each other. And I just think it was so beautiful, and this book is amazing. It's one of my favorites, and if you haven't read it, I don't know what you're doing, get on it. This book is so good. So next I have another one of my favorite books of last year, and that is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. So this is a really cool book on its own. It is basically this historical fantasy, and it's like a gender-bent retelling of the Ming Dynasty. And before reading this book, I had really no knowledge of what the Ming Dynasty was. This was a dynasty in China actually I was gonna say hundreds of thousands of years ago. No, it's I don't know when this was, but it's like a long time ago this dynasty was in power, and it was just so interesting reading the story and learning about this history, and getting really just interested in like what actually happened in our real world, because I just think that this book does a really good job of showing all of these historical moments. And again, because it's this gender bent version of it, you really get interested in what actually happened, at least for me. And I love when books can do that, you know, make me open my eyes to something that I maybe didn't know before. So that definitely happened with this book. This book has pretty much 2 main romances, and both of the romances are queer, and I think that they were written so well and just do so much in terms of a romantic relationship. Again, with this story, you have such strong, complex characters that have so much going on in their lives, and both of the romances with technically our main characters are really like add to the story and add to the characters and add to kind of complicate their situations. And this story has actually been said to be a bit of a Song of Achilles situation, and while I do understand that comparison, I don't necessarily agree with it. I think one of the relationships specifically is what that comparison is talking about, and I don't necessarily think it's all that similar. But if you do like the Song of Achilles and that relationship, I think you probably might like this one. So yeah, overall, I just really love this book, and for not only the romance, but I think the book itself is just so great, so well written, so interesting, and you should definitely read it if you haven't. And next up, I have Gods of Jane and Shadow by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is another fantasy book, and it's one of my favorites. This book is basically a Mayan and Aztec mythology retelling, or not retelling, it's inspired by that mythology and that world, and that I just think that's such a cool thing in and of itself, because I don't think I've ever really read books that deal with like Mayan mythology, and I just thought that was so interesting. And not only that, but then to have like the cultural side of things. Book takes place in Mexico, as well as like in, I don't remember what year, but it's definitely in the past, in like the 1900s or something like that. And I just thought that was really cool to see another kind of historical setting in a different country with a different culture, and how like just cool that was. So I love that. And in terms of the romance in this book, it's basically, I would say, a bit of a like right person, wrong time situation. So we have our two main characters who are dealing with a lot and dealing with this really crazy situation, and they're have just met, and they end up having to go on these quests together. And just the way that their relationship kind of builds throughout their quests, and you see the growth and the kind of love that there is. And there's a situation that you kind of know, like you kind of know that this is where it's leading to, and the end of that means that maybe these characters aren't going to be able to be together. And throughout the book, you're just thinking like, is there a way? Can they stay together? Can things work out for them? So I don't know, I was really like invested in the relationship and hooked into the story. And I think, again, on its own, this book is absolutely amazing, but the relationship really pushed it over the edge for me. I think the relationship was so well done, so cute, so romantic, and there were just so many moments in this book that were just so fun and great to read. So I really love this. And then lastly, I have one of my favorite, if not my favorite, YA fantasy ever, and that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. This book is one of the most well-written books I've ever read. It's one of the like coolest and most unique plots I've ever read, and it has some of the most complex, interesting, and cool characters I've ever read. So all in all, it's one of the best books I've ever read. Basically, our main romance though is between Strange, who is the main character, and Sarai, who's another character we get kind of later on in the book. But both of these characters, and we see both of their stories separately before like they even meet each other and become a relationship or like a romance, and they just have really interesting situations, and they're just so complex and so well written, so fleshed out, and I just love that. And then I would say that this romance is a bit of a star-crossed lovers, a bit of a Romeo and Juliet situation, and I just think that whole aspect was really cool. Basically, these two characters aren't necessarily on the same side and might not necessarily be able to be together, but their love for each other and their relationship and their development is just so well done, and you really, really, really want them to be together and want the people around them to want that for them, if that makes sense. I think that, again, this is another book that is just so, so amazing on its own, and then with this romance in the book, I think that this book is just on all counts one of the best books ever. So those are all the romance recommendations I have for you today. I hope you like this video, and if you have read any of those books, let me know, and if you haven't, definitely check them out. I will see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.